death, and a particularly nasty strain of gum disease, made a bet as to who could the quickest make man sit up and take notice. Kind of an unfair wager, what with all of death's experience and all. But hey, injected the morbific one, what are friends for? Miss Perkins, please take notice of that on my behalf and remind me not to make a dental appointment. A bug will forgive you if you step on him, if you're bigger than he was. Not so small-time ideas. On one world, local conditions told life. I'm going to make about 6 billion creatures here, and I'm going to make half of them artists and the other half critics, and see what'll happen. And life replied, sounds kind of interesting, but which half will be which? Ah, don't matter, said conditions. Yeah, I guess not, replied life. The two gunfighters stood toe-to-toe and both declared, this place ain't big enough for both of us. And a timid little shopkeeper shouted out to them, but you two are a matching set of frontal lobes. And boy, was they surprised. The frontier is always opened by the fearless, then settled by the fat. It's never necessary to tell a real mystic to get out of town. He'll be gone before you even get your tongue warmed up. From atop a parapet, the royal philosopher looked out across the land and reflected. Everyone screws up, but their genes make them do it. And the king passing by, still with that bullet lodged in his side, said, you're fired. While laying around one day thinking, one guy had this thought, is being physical condemnable? And his mind spoke up and said, some mystics seem to think so. And the man replied, no, some pseudo-mystics may think so. And his mind realized, oops, you're right. In a three-legged race, the reason that the first and second legs so dislike, or at least so ignore the third leg, is because it connects them. Oops. After having lived nearly 35 years of fear and uncertainty, one man finally thought, I'm far too nervous to have a nervous system. Strange medical facts and human curios. One man mistook his mind for himself. Strange, but true. Curious, but not so much as you might imagine. Tune in next time when it could be you. And a certain solo gunslinger looked himself dead in the mirror and snarled, smile when you say that, partner. Another way you can identify the mystical mind is that it can cause people to laugh without them being able to say exactly what it is they're laughing at. Some info regarding the physical aspects of thought, known among the dumb as psychological news. If you try to defend yourself, you can't defend yourself. As the old lion began to lose his aggressive edge, he took it to be depression. Hearing what other people have to say is part of the price you pay for being civilized. Hey, viewer rights. After watching your show for a while, I've decided that if I took everything you said seriously, I'd become a serious man indeed. Today's fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a little boy and girl and some other person. And one day, they all three struck out for an adventure in the woods. And soon they came upon a house which had 3 different areas within. And one of the adventurers went to live in the stomach. And another crawled up into the limbic system. And a third one hollered out, help, I'm stuck. When this one writer got to the point where he could no longer type as fast as he could think, he quit thinking. Just kidding. He actually started using a pencil again. Okay, truth is, the last part was the kidding part. The first version I gave you was the correct one. The recruiter for the monastery told the young possibility, a mystic has forgotten more than the ordinary will ever know. And the head monk passing by, with reality still lodged in his side, said, a real mystic has even forgotten that he ever knew more. And the recruiter then had to up the ante to include a new Corvette. Looking out at the bright, clear day, the man said, "Sunshine doesn't fool me." Looking out at the dark, rainy day, the man said, "Bad weather doesn't fool me." Looking out at man, life said, "Who the hell do they think they are?" And looking back to 1980, we find the number one slot being held down by Billy Joel doing "It's Still Rock and Roll to Me." The dean of the school addressed the incoming med students. "The demands of life are such that they cause most people to die." And the lad in the rear said, "May I ask a question?" And the dean replied, "No." Another way in which life has arranged things locally so as to keep things interesting and the simple pissed off is by making everyone believe that they have an important piece of something. Efficiency in your own backyard. If you keep a mad dog mad, you don't have to chain him. He'll stay at home on his own. Thought I heard barking. One afternoon, a man sat by a window and reflected. Are all mystics poets, artists, and thinkers? Where are those of a more physical common mode? And having no answer to this, he got up and went bowling. A person told their son, "Man was made to be verbal." Now shut up about it. There are two ways of looking at it. That everything in life is arranged delicately, or it's not. Delicately like human relations, or not delicately like mountains and landslides. You can either look at these things as though they're delicately arranged or that they're not. Go ahead, you can do it. A man told his neighbor, "The main lesson the course taught me was that if you make everyone else seem to really suck, it makes your own lips seem less puckered." And the neighbor said, "How much did the course cost?" And the man said, "Oh, you're carrying this thing too far." Boy, does that sound familiar or what? The neuroneurology school of the air. The reason that human brain cells don't reproduce themselves is because they're dying every day anyway. Copyrighted 1994, University of Tampa by the Sea. A man asked himself, "Is there some reason that neural muscles move faster than physical ones?" He thought on this for a while, and coming to no conclusion, he left and went swimming. One guy's theory. Men concocted all their institutions to keep from having to look directly at life. If you think about it, if he's correct, then man invented the idea of death to keep from living too much. That's the good thing about theories. You can dismiss them. And ideas too. You can just dismiss them. Yeah, and same goes for an unruly class of youngsters. Yeah. The human brain is divided into different time zones. And if you don't like that one, then the human brain is divided up into different educational levels, like in school. The head monk confided to his cousin who had come to visit, "The real fun of running a sinking lifeboat that's learning how to fly is that you can get all kinds of people to want to jump aboard." A person told their daughter, "It's really hard to make sense out of life if you start talking about it." Okay, still another distinction. At best, ordinary minds use humor in the form of satire or parody. That is, as they put it, to expose and denounce folly and deception. While the humor that the mystic might use actually has no suitable name, since it is to simply point out reality with no criticism involved. When it comes to being free from ancient survival aggressions, it costs a lot to live in such poverty. The economics of being awake are not the same as for sleeping. A certain father so advised one of his sons, "The mystical area of your brain will drive you crazy unless you either ignore it, cover it up, drug it, misdirect it, or hold on till you get a bit older and then just ignore it all over again." You know, noted Professor Sardonic, life's just full of neat suggestions. City news. Only the physical get famous. And a viewer mused, well, what the hell would be the benefit of a well-known hermit anyway? Is anybody paying attention out there? Okay, for you serious advanced students of such affairs, the real story. The real way you can tell that someone is a mystic, and I mean a real mystic, is that there is no particular way you can tell. So there, for all of you serious advanced students of such things. A man walked into a nursery and said to the clerk, "I want to start a monastery." And the clerk said, "Have you considered some nice white corn or baby peas?" Additional retail news. No matter the product or service, if it's not essential to existence and you're hawking it, you're also a whoring. And a certain transcendental representative mused that the only thing that saves his kind of activity from inclusion in the above is the fact that to some, the mystic is of absolute necessity. The biped creatures of one world have a myth that says they were given 2 feet by creation so that one could represent hormones and one neurons, and were then tied to themselves at the waist and told to run. Those of you foresightful enough to have obtained those special telescopes we offered last month can turn them toward that particular planet and perhaps spot something familiar. And a man who used to be a mystic but is no longer said, "See, that's just like you weird people. Why should everyone go to all the trouble and expense of acquiring some new exotic piece of equipment if it's just going to ultimately be used in some mundane setting?" Whoa, big boy, whoa. Some aeronautical news. When standard terrestrial acclimated planes attempt to break free into the super-atmospheric space, their first sensation is one of feeling as though they're going to come apart and explode. Related traveler's advisory. As long as you keep the mind thinking about Paris or Rome or Rio, or even the magical places like Atlanta, Shangri-La, and Paradise, you don't have to go there. And Professor Sardonic popped in again and said, "See, I told you." Insider's anthropological updating. Most of man's creation myths he just made up. And further verbal more. On this one world, the martial arts work only if you're attacking someone named Marshall. Morality is a substitute for real civility, and civility for full-blown intelligence. There is no substitute for greater consciousness. A mystical system without special, inalterable terms and descriptions is doomed, same as those who pursue one that does. And one man said, "I don't get it." And I replied, "I know. That's why you don't get it." And a kid looked around at life and this kind of stuff again and asked himself, if it's all just a game, then why this game within a game? The mystics' one oath, quoted verbatim and in its entirety. A mystic is always fearless. He's got to be. What choice does he have? The way things are in real fairy tale land. One day the old king said to the young prince, the pretender to the throne, "I don't allow young pretenders around here." Yes, how things really are in your land. That's what I said, wasn't it? After some years of studying the matter, one man announced this conclusion: emotions are good for just one thing, but I don't know what it is. The job market. The reason you never see philosophical wolves is the scarcity of positions. As long as you think that the mystical area of your brain is not actually in your brain, but out there somewhere, you're safe. You're okay, you're safe, you're right on. See, life said I could tell you that without the professor's help. From the wings, a man appeared who announced, "Let us now sing an ode, a hymn to our own hometown." And from the audience, a voice replied, "Nay, let us shoot it." One day outside the theater, a man thought, if it's got continuity and consistency, forget it. Everyone's here on a mission, but everyone's forgotten what it is. And the guy outside the theater said, I told you to forget it. Freedom, the sweetest of illusions, and doubly so to a mystic. The human nervous system is divided into 3 parts, and each of the 3, well, at least one of them, can then imagine that it's divided up into as many parts as it wants to. This is how Italy became a nation. And a few other weird things occurred. A particular man asked himself, what is the benefit of originality and spontaneity? And knowing how rehearsed are normal thoughts and emotions, he also knew the answer. The wisdom of all creatures is in their genes, though humans have whipped cream and a cherry on theirs. A viewer of this show wrote himself a letter asking, why keep calling the same thing over and over again? Yeah. Mysticism and the human nervous system. One man took off all of his clothes, and I mean all of his clothes, and felt much better. The mystic's question. Why is the brain encased in a rigid skull? Why is man surrounded by an elastic skin? And why do I have to put up all this shit? The difference. Human emotion you have to fake. The other kind, you don't. No, the above was to have been subtitled, How to Better Understand the Word Fake. During one of those weekend retreat kind of things, Local Conditions found itself sharing a cabin with the snake and took the opportunity to raise this point. Just what's been accomplished if you do get people to think more? And the snake replied, shut up and go to sleep. Even though it was after lights out, some kids could be heard out in the woods singing. Genes, the magical fruit, the more you have, the more rude noises you make as a human. And the snake groaned, is there no rest for the slippery? Even though it would not have been unexpected that someone perhaps took it lightly, last time I drew a little stylized thing of the brain and mentioned that this whole idea of mysticism and etc., that there was a place in the brain, a mystical area of the brain. At the time I said it, I had no particular plans to go into it, but since I'd already said it, I'll tell you, that's not just a drawing, that is a fact. And it can be of particular interest, if not use, to realize that that is the basis of every dream in the world. That is, not knowing about that is the basis of every dream in the world that man's ever had about religion, the future, the cosmos, creation, and any matters of an extraordinary nature. There is literally a place in the human brain. Right now I just call it the mystical because we've been using that term, and it's a historically validated and accepted one, whether you would have chosen it yourself or not. But it includes everything that would seem to be at a far edge of man, the intellectual, civilized creature. And I say at the far edge, not necessarily in the sense of it being these kind of deranged, occult-driven, dreamy-eyed people believing they're talking to invaders from Mars or dead spirits of engines and cab drivers from Teaneck. But at the edge right up to where it gets to appear unusual to the middle class. In other words, it is the area that gave rise to all organized religion. The religions considered to be acceptable in the community. The area is almost a blank space. As some of you may know, just in passing, neurology, ordinary in-town science, keeps playing around with electrodes in people's brains, and when they turn philosophical, they like to, either they or their interpreters, their popular interpreters, like to point out that as far as they can tell, well, they take it as a fact that there are large areas of the brain that show no electrical activity of the same sort demonstratively involved with other human mental activities, which they now can plot to the degree that they can stick an electrode down and make you laugh, cry, wet your pants, go into a daze, come out of a daze, hear voices, go deaf. But they find that there are large areas of the brain and that just seem to be just laying there. They can't get them to, they can't find what they're doing. Consider all of the continuing philosophical, intellectual debates and arguments about whether man is primarily driven by instinct and heredity, or whether he is in some way primarily influenced by his environment, by his culture. And as you all know, they have been fighting that back and forth under different names. If it's not out in the academic, secular world, it is the same thing as considering the more religious-based ideas of man being controlled by good impulses, by allegiance or desire to align himself with the gods, with the good forces, or whether he is in some way being held captive or has submitted himself to the clutches of the nefarious hoofed one, Satan and Lucifer and evil forces. And the subdivisions in that never caught on much is whatever case any particular man is, if we say, well, he seems to be trying to lead a good life or is a question of, well, did he actually decide to do it? When do the gods let some people seem to join forces with the coming kingdom of goodness and civility? And in other times, that the gods, the great forces, just seem to ignore people and let them live in squalor, and they seem to have no particular sense of morality, no civic duty. Sometimes known in the Western world as man predestined, which, as some of you religious historians or hard-shell Baptists may know, had a short-lived burst of popularity, but about the same as periodically now somebody comes up with the idea like of sociobiology that man is actually driven with a new name by his genes. And it's real popular for like 2 or 3 months, and it's like everybody goes, I didn't hear that. Predestination is now just a footnote. But in one sense, if you go back, if you were interested in the ideas of religion and on the basis of how it works, the dynamics within the human sphere, that answered everything. Just right there. All the debates about, well, why does God let bad things happen to good people? Why does God let good things happen to bad people? How come God can't keep the book straight? How come the good die young? How come the good live too long, get on our nerves? Or how come the bad don't die soon enough? How come the bad hang around too long and take up space? None of those questions make any sense. And when God came up and he went, well, I got it. It's all predestined. That God did it, not the planets, none of that. You just predestined. He's already decided beforehand. And it was easy to explain. I mean, he's God. He didn't make you not know what's going to happen. And those who heard it at the time went, oh, geez, it was so simple. We just never realized it. 2 or 3 months. About the same lifespan as sociobiology took hold here, I guess, in the 70s in the Western world. Same thing. Back to all the questions, and you don't have to be faced yourself, or you have not necessarily been entertaining yourself, the question based upon you wondering whether you're being driven by heredity and genes, etc. But everyone is faced with this. This is part of the human mind. This is where most people live in the human mind. Those of you who remember, all of you are a little boy and girl and some other person, and you're off on an adventure in the woods. You've forgotten the tale already. you're all entertaining. The mind, you're stuck living in a certain place. And part of it is wondering why you can't change, thinking you should change. People are telling you should change. You're trying to change. You're trying not to change. That the whole mind, it seems like you're trying to either, I guess we can start making up allegories again. It's like you're trying to juggle rubber balls that are on fire, stuck with two-edged razor blades in them. You're trying to do that, or you're trying to stop doing that, but you think, well, if I do, then the floor will fall out from under me. Or you think, well, as horrible as it is, if I stop, everybody else seems to be doing it, then I'll be crazy. I'll be the outcast. You can't seem to find where to stand. You can't seem where to go. You can't apparently figure out exactly what to do in life or what to think. And although ordinary people will try and attribute it, try and place it in an area of having to do with behavior or emotions or some sort of spiritual mission, without the mind, there is no such question, there is no such concern. And so you find out that you're living like in a certain room up here, and it's only that room that finds this to be of any particular interest. And in that room, it's a pressing interest. It is a supreme interest. But the reason I was going to point out, right at the physical heart of all the apparent philosophical questions, all of the psychological quandaries, all of the psychological uncertainties that people feel, comes from this one place. The mind got going. And you can look at all the myths if you want to, like take the Western one again, that God drove the nervous system. The brain was Adam and Eve. The brain started getting fired up. It was on the verge of beginning to talk, and as soon as it could say one thing, then God said, now go. And the curse being that it was no longer living in savage splendor. It was no longer living where the order of the day was simply, eat, screw, take a nap, eat, screw, take a nap, eat, screw, take a nap. Mm-hmm. Then you had to do more. Now you got to think. And you think, do I want to screw? What do I want to eat? Mm-hmm. Is it too early to go to bed? But you can look at all the Garden of Eden, and that story just being one of many all over the world, is always that the gods created man, and then in some way said, go out and get away from where we started. Always some form of sort of a pox of sorts upon you. Go away. Get away, get out of here, get off on your own. I don't like how this is going, or now it's up to you. The Western version, the Jewish Christian one's a little harsher, it's not important, but is that they actually screwed up and made God mad, and he said, all right, get out of here. And it was an outright curse. But it's all the same thing, that you were in some way separated from the great beloved, as the Sufis say. You were separated, now you have taken one step away from creation. Creation has pushed you away. And the pushing away, you can look at as very simple. The pushing away is being able to speak, because now that you can speak, no matter what you do, you are one step removed from creation. As long as your mind is operating at any reasonable level, then this is no longer a cup. This is no longer just liquid refreshment. This is now all sorts of things. It is now, according to what the environment was, or what conversation was going on, or what particular thing was already in your wiring system. This is not just liquid refreshment. It's now, is that decaf or is that regular? Have I been drinking too much? What's the latest report on caffeine? Is that real? Did I put actual cream in here, or is that skim milk? Am I putting on weight? Did I put on too much milk? Maybe I'm allergic to milk. I wonder if it affects the taste having it in plastic. Why did I bring it up here on the stage? Am I putting on weight? Well, maybe I should go. You understand? There it is. There's nothing weird going on. But it is no longer simply that. It is now anything you think about it. And it's not either right or wrong from any objective sense, but you have now, there is the step, there is the curse, to take the Old Testament version, there is the curse of God saying, well, get away, now you're going to have to get out and work. You're going to have to leave paradise and go out and do something. But in one sense, what it was, now you got to go out and think about things. You got to talk about them. So, as the Sufis and many others would say, but there's sometimes comes to mind, we have been separated from the beloved. The beloved was, I didn't have to think about things. But that doesn't sound like much, and so they describe the great bleeding heart at the soul of the universe who yearns for us, little men, to come back, to find it. And they engage in metaphorical love poetry. It's supposed to be metaphorical. But like everything else, I know it's lots of ordinary people read it and go, oh, I'd love to dance with God. If I could just find him, I'd hug him. They kind of missed it, but then no importance, it sells books. The curse, if you want to look that way, is simply the removal, the separation from the great Godhead. Your separation from the beloved is, now you got to talk about it. That if you took that even literally, the whole idea of a Jehovah or a God, or that one time man was in direct connection with the source of creation, that you were in a direct relationship, which if you check almost any mystical or any dictionary, but especially any along those kind of extraordinary lines, they refer to mysticism itself. And even the dictionary definition is something along the lines of, one of the definitions is a belief that you can in some way come closer into touch with the mysteries of life, or you can get in touch with in some way the forces behind, the reality behind the apparent reality of life. Which is saying that you in some way can put yourself back in touch with creation. But the back in touch is the only thing that separated you. So the ordinary mind takes these stories and these myths as well it was a curse, we got to pay it off. Or the curse is now the universe is expanded. If you want to mix up metaphors from the biblical and the religious into the attempted allegorical science, that the universe is expanding and we're getting further away from wherever the Big Bang was. There's many ways that people attempt to look at it according to how seriously they take the idea of mysticism or religion, but it is all an idea that in some way we're trying to put ourselves back closer, to get back in touch, to get back to paradise, to get back to our original state before we sinned. That's all one thing and one thing only. They're trying to put the brain in reverse, or put very specifically on the basis of behavior. It is no more and no less than trying to overcome the gap, overcome the distance that now exists between you and because of, and it's not an ordinary people, or fairly ordinary people, especially ordinary mystics, have stumbled across this idea and kicked around for thousands of years, which leads itself right into the idea that there's magical words. Because they understand, without knowing what the basis of it is, men understand that words are supremely important. And they obviously understand it. Even those of an entirely secular bent understand that words are extremely important to put up space vehicles. Mathematicians, scientists, people in any technical field, they understand that you must be precise, which is part of what mathematics is to take words and to try and strangle all of the potential emotional juice out of them. To be precise. So everyone understands that there's a sense, in a sense, magic in words, and somewhere outside NASA, in the halls of academia, is where they believe that there is something even more magical in quotation marks about words. And so you come up in religions that there's always chants and prayers and certain names that you must say on certain days, or certain names you must call God, or certain names you can't say. It's all the way from the jungles of New Guinea to the polished marble halls in Rome that there is some kind of magic to words if you know what it is. But what they're missing is the magic in words they should replace with the power of words, which you could get and go, well, okay. But then they still wouldn't see it. The power of words is the distance it is put. The power of words is that which separates man from the belief that in some way I should be able to and should get back in touch with the primeval evil forces, the creative force, with God. I should be back in touch. Once you speak, you can't undo it. Not at that level. Any more than you could, you can pull a large rock up a hill with a rope. But if you get down the bottom with a rope around that same boulder, you can't push it up the hill. I truly hope no one at home is watching this that is sexually dysfunctional like a man, and it just suddenly... I am not Dr. Weisenheimer. Weimeranian? This is not sex advice.
Yeah.
You cannot undo talk. You cannot undo progress. You cannot run the parade backwards. You cannot, at any ordinary level, you cannot reverse time and all of that. But what is not realized after it turns into men taking, and I keep pointing out that the ordinary mind takes what was originally myth to be literal, there's another step I'm leaving out. I just didn't say specifically. Some of you probably already realize. Let's take the being driven away from the Garden of Eden, of the gods, the creation forces, separating themselves from their creation, that they created man through whatever myth or story that we could pick out. Said, go away, or I'm going to leave you, get away from my face, I'm not going to fool with you, or I'll see you later, whatever it is. We're now no longer in contact. Like the story said originally, that Adam and Eve was there in the garden, and it said that Jehovah would come down and walk among them. He'd come down for a visit. That does not happen to any sane person anymore. Sane person. God does not come down and stroll in your garden and talk to you. But to take that literally is like the further step away from. But then to realize that that is a metaphorical for something else, having nothing to do, or something else besides the idea of a physical God, and etc. But there is a step before the metaphorical, which the second stage hardly anybody wants to deal with except in theory. But the first stage is simply what? Physical. It was brain activity. That's what I'm getting at. The Garden of Eden and all of that, you can do it yourself. I've already almost done it again today. You can see it as being a metaphor. And you don't strain to do it. If you have to strain to do it, you don't have mystical genes in your genes anyway.
Yeah.
You don't have to strain to do it. If you got enough mystical... Did they ask me not to use a Spanish word for... No. I got this whole list they don't want me to say. With enough mystical genes in your genes, it's not a matter of looking for metaphor and what everyone else takes to either be history or the literal retelling of something. It almost gets to be the other way around. Not exactly, but the other way around. That you almost have to remind yourself, wait a minute, this is an actual bus schedule. The bus is leaving at, or the plane is leaving at 5:30. Maybe I'll get there at 5:30. Because I should have blamed that on somebody else. I don't mean that it has to happen to you, but there is that inclination once you lose a certain kind of serious respect or regard for city life. It's like Flight 403 at 7:16 at gate D5, and then other things I'd have to drag in almost all of life. And you almost have to say, oh, that's right, I'm catching that plane. You know what time it is? Well, would you like to just pretend I didn't do that? At least you feel like you missed everything. All right. There are many people in the world that think it's a real trick to be able to look around and begin to see just ordinary mundane affairs as having potentially a metaphorical, allegorical message in them. I'm saying there's also people who, just say that's all they see. I mean, at first blush, you just look around and it's all just an interesting, like a cartoon show. That it's all just an allegory. And then you have to, well, that's right, I got to catch that plane. That's a schedule. That's right, I wanted to go there. Or you look, and it's an allegorical sale, and you think, well, wait a minute, I was going to buy one of those things anyway, but, it's half price. So you're about to walk out, and just all you enjoyed was the allegory of it. You like humor better? The humor that they're having a sale of if you buy 2 women's brasiers, you get a chisel free. A planer? I don't know. But anyway, all right, if you buy 2 women's brasiers, you get a free Bible. I don't. Whatever it is, you look and you think, and all you see is the. I don't mean sarcastically. Professor Sardonicus is not here. But you have to remind yourself, oh, well, I want a Bible or a woman's brassiere. At any rate, behind anything, without stretching it, once you're, in a sense, you have moved your center of gravity, your home base in your brain, which I'll agree, for those who want to point it out, is not possible. Not impossible. I at least had the courtesy, you remember, to change that for you. It's not possible to change your center, your home base in your brain. Now, people without thinking about that are trying to. That's what psychiatry is about. That's what converting to religion is about. That's what in a lesser or more subtle form is what people believe education's about, but especially psychiatry, especially trying to improve yourself, trying to change, trying to better yourself. Is an attempt to change, because if you have not noticed, you grew up in a certain place. For those of you who didn't like the speaker who said, let's sing a hymn, an ode to our hometown, a guy, some voice in the audience said, I got a better idea, let's shoot it. Yeah. I noticed that brought the house down. Flimsy house. Everybody was, if you hadn't noticed, you grew up somewhere. Yeah, hometown. Yeah. But I did. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about, you grew up somewhere in your brain. So that's one way you can always tell the simple, the cruder in life, those holding things together. I keep pointing at, not to point at them, but to point at you. It's in your nervous system. How do other people identify themselves? What do people take to be of extreme importance in their life? And I'm not talking about those outside the mainstream of life. I'm talking about the stalwart pillars of society, as they continually refer physically to their background. Not only their genealogy, but where they grew up, where they went to school, who their family is. The Perkins. Now you understand, I'm not talking about just the Perkins who, some of them live outside of Frankfurt, but the family of Perkins. And people take it very important, which is about the same as get a free planer with 2 women's brasiers. No. According to your tolerance for humor and the importance of life. See? At any rate, the ordinary, that's one of the dead giveaways, in case you had never noticed. Always vote for a man. At least you take it as an attack. Always vote for a man. Move next door. Encourage them to take the apartment next to you. Someone who is very serious about what they are. It doesn't matter what. Yes, I am an Irish Jew. I am an Italian Protestant. I am a Kenyan Muslim. And I come from a long line of Kenyan Muslims. The longer the better. And he takes it very seriously. Vote for him. So I don't have to tell you that. Everybody knows not to vote for somebody that shows up and got paint on them. And I don't mean house paint, oil paint. Or find out the guy's got some talent. They can sing or he writes poetry. Don't vote for that son of a bitch. You know better than that. And you try to talk to him about where you go to school, and he went, I didn't go to school. I dropped out. I didn't like it. I found out about the 5th grade. I asked 2 or 3 questions. They didn't know anything. They just weren't teaching what I was interested in. No, I didn't. Don't vote for that man. Or you say, well, who's your family? Well, my father, he was a bum. Yeah. My family was no consequence. Well, what's your nationality? What's your background? Jesus, I don't know. You gonna buy a painting? You know not to vote for somebody like that. The only reason I went through all that, you also understand the kind of people interested in this, including you people. At one initial brush, and you still got that in you, is you have got a lot more regard for somebody who is an artist of some kind, has some talent, than you, I'm sure, do for some pompous, I shouldn't use negative modifiers to set it up, but you have more regard for an artist. You probably have more regard for whoever you like. I hate to date the tape and start saying, All right, Papa Haydn, Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Joan Jett. You got more regard for them than you do probably the Pope, the President, the head of Citibank. You just do, which is all right. But don't vote for them. Because those who take, we hadn't lost a place, have we? Not me. That everybody grew up somewhere. See, they take the somewhere physically. They take it literally, and they carry it with them the rest of their life. When a man wants to hand you his business card, of course, if he's really high class, you're supposed to know who he is. But if he has a business card, the business card is physically where he grew up. Yes, I am Director, CEO Perkins of Citibank. The Perkins of Martha's Vineyard. You know, I mean, not some of these Perkins down from Arkansas or somewhere, from Perkinsville. But we're not talking about where you grew up there. The reason I went through all that is other people take it seriously because they got no other choice. They don't want to, people are not wired up to take the other place seriously, to take it into regard. Because you remember growing up somewhere, you know, whatever city, whatever house, and probably most people are 6 or 7 years old when you first, your memory seemed to have started, your consciousness started, and you remember who you grew up with and where the kids lived next door and where you played and where you went to school. Where you really grew up was here. That's the only reason you remember it. You grew up here, a place in your brain. And to try and change that center of gravity is your main counter. It's your reservation. It's where you do business. It's where the home branch is or the home office is. You may have little branches, but that's where you do business. That's where Bob is Bob and Mary is Mary. That's it. And to think you can change that through psychiatry, through a self-help program, through getting rich, through converting to another religion, it's just one of life's hobbies. Because it is not possible. Possible. Simply can't be done, which is why it is a suitable hobby. If it could be done, people have done it and went, well, Jesus, that was nothing, and you wouldn't hear about it. Religion would be dead, civilization would almost be dead, because you've got to be continually attempting to complete that which cannot be completed. You grew up somewhere here. That is what people do not take into account. Now, they will take it into account what they believe in an expanded civilized form. They'll say, well, you're talking about the kind of psychological traumas and the kind of psychological imprinting that made my particular personality what it is, which is why I'm trying to work on it now. Because God knows my family was not totally functional. And so I grew up with a certain, rough edges, and I had to put up a certain kind of abuse, psychological, emotional, or otherwise. And so I am trying to rearrange that. And that's what you're talking about. But see, they believe that as long as you call it psychological, as long as you say, well, I'm doing both parts, remember, I'm doing this ordinary person has heard that. And they say, well, what you're saying, I grew up somewhere in my brain. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we all grew up kind of in a psychological neighborhood. I understand metaphor. I'm not a dummy. That's not metaphor. We're talking about brain chemistry. We're talking about physical areas of the brain. So you forgot. We've gone way past metaphor. We've gone past literal. But they would take my description of growing up somewhere here, my point, a good civilized, sophisticated person, go, I know what you're saying. Yeah, we do. I got you. You're actually saying we kind of grew up in not just a house and a family, physically, but we kind of grew up in a psychological family, psychological house. And it made me what I am. Now, as long as that's as far as it goes, if that's what made you what you are, you believe that you can engage in remodeling. You believe that psychiatry, self-help, reading a book, will certainly can change one. Notwithstanding the fact that there's not one iota of evidence. Forget proof, there's not even any evidence. That's like saying, well, being a Christian or a Jew, being religious will save your life. Write that down. Ask for a guarantee. They'll give you one. Don't ask them where you're going to present the guarantee should things not work out. The point of light being is, again, it's just right there in your face. It's point blank. And to say that ordinary people do not see it is perhaps, I suggest to you, a disservice to ordinary people. To say, well, they're so dumb, they don't realize that everything that life ordinarily promises never works. You're right. None of it works. Psychiatry has never worked. Religion has never worked. getting rich has never worked, whatever people's aim was. It's never worked, and nobody realizes it. God, are they stupid? I never realized until you pointed out to me. Don't be too hasty. You're always back to what I was. Kind of reverse it and say hinting again the last couple of nights. What if you get all these ordinary idiots in the world and you held them all down and tickled them?
Yeah.
All the bankers and all the priests and all, and got them alone and made them tell the truth. And you said, do you realize, or psychiatrists, everybody, and you said, do you realize this whole thing is a bunch of hokum? Phooey? Bullshit. Do you realize this is just, none of this works. You're just stealing people's money. You dressed all up and charge them $100 an hour, and every time you've been in business, practice here 20 years, you've never helped anybody, and all you do is every 5 years, you up your rates. He goes, yes, you're right.
No.
And you tickle him and go, well, do you really believe in this? And he goes, oh, stop. And finally he says, well, certainly not. Are you crazy? And he finally decides that you may be the only crazy person he ever met. You mean you've been taking it seriously? You thought I was actually, that I thought I was serious?
Yeah.
Don't forget that. Oh, all right, maybe you should forget it. But anyway, at least you be too hasty to think the whole world's idiots. There's always that possibility. I mean, as long as there are still playgrounds on this planet, as long as they still have seesaws that work, you remember this. You can turn around and believe that you are a playground mystic, and that I do begin to see. I see it, the world, I hate to be crude about it, but the world is just, they're blind, they're idiots. People are spending, going in debt to go talk to a psychiatrist, and the guy sing behind him, he's dozing, he dresses up in women's underwear on the weekend, he beats his wife, he takes drugs, find out something about priests, find out something about your own family, and you think, they're idiots, and they stand around. No, they'll show up to work, show up to church or synagogue, and they go, yes, I'm so-and-so. God, thank God I can see here in the world of the blind. Remember, there is this possibility. Now, you got to understand that you're in the minority to be that insightful. That's why they're looked at as being prophets and gifted by gods and touched by fate. Being the mystical, the few in life that can see through this foolishness, this sham. Just a few. While the rest of the world are just blind idiots. Remember this. There is this distinct possibility. When you consider you just got 1 or 2 people over here, a couple of thousand, and then you got billions. Now I know when you're over here you think, well, there's no doubt that I'm correct. Don't ever say no doubt.
Yeah.
There's just a possibility. I mean, the odds being so unequal, to say the least, that they're not idiots. They understand full well that the whole thing is a sham, and if they even had the time or the interest to notice you, which they don't, which shows the popularity of mysticism, and that you actually made them go, look at what I'm saying. And they finally go, all right, and they listen for a minute and they go, oh, that? You're worried about this shit? Like, you take this seriously? Where you grew up, the area of the brain is the literal basis of all metaphor, the physical basis of all metaphor, all allegory. And of course, all allegory and metaphor and etc., and all myth is the basis then of all literal reality. The stage, the last two, if you want to look at them as stages or level, the last two can coexist. The last two are taken into account by ordinary people. That is, the world of myth, metaphor, and allegory. They can see that as being one level, and they can see what, according to the time of day and how warm they were and what they'd had to eat. They could see this being like an underlying basis of what the ordinary mind takes as being literal reality. That is, you can get people, as long as it didn't sound good attack, you could get religious people that you could say, you started the story about Adam and Eve in the garden. I'm talking about people that take it literally true, which many people do, and many religions take their Vedic Mikams to be the literal word of God, the literal telling of what has happened to man. But you could get those people and say, well, all right, that could be true. I'm not arguing that. But you understand, you could, and you could just weave the kind of little tales that you should be able to stand there and do as fast as you could speak now, and say, do you realize that even beyond that even if it was true that God actually created man and woman here and did this and that and put them in a garden, that also, now just look at your own life and the way things seem to be, that also has a deeper message. It has an allegorical message. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but you understand it has, and you start describing what would sound like psychological, sociological pictures, morals, and they'll go, yes. They'll do that, and they'll go, yes. And it doesn't disturb the literality. And so in that sense, whether they wanted to look at it as actual one being the wellspring to the other, that is, they can accept the fact that one can support the other, that there can be two levels. People do not walk around thinking in that way. The religious are those who engage or who, as a profession, study anthropology or mythology. But what none of them can do, what does not even seem to be of any significance, much less reality, is why I was telling you tonight, but behind that, physical area of the brain or physical activity of the brain. And that's what it is. That is why I slipped up and said that there is a mystical area of the brain. And that being true is that one spot of consciousness, that one spot of neural activity in your head. Let's say you're a would-be mystic. It is like that is the bulb in a flashlight. And you see the light inside your own skull of looking around, and you realize that that is the hunger. Let's call it the hunger for mysticism, the hunger for the secret, the hunger for some transcendental, meta-gnostic information to try and get back in touch to the creation. The thing itself is the light bulb, like of a flashlight, and everywhere you look, it's like it's shining. But until you realize that it comes from the brain, comes from the brain, is in the brain, is there, then you constantly, you would be less than sane, even at a metaphysical level. You'd be less than sane not to think, well, it's out here somewhere. Because we're not talking about ordinary sight now. It is like mystical sight, or at least the mystical hunger, the mystical suspicion, and you still turn around and it's somewhere. Which gives rise, as I just hit in passing last time, to all the ideas of mystical places on this earth, PowerPoints, the God's hiding somewhere, the secret hiding. It seems to be without any doubt. Because your own mystical vision, your own mystical suspicion, this one little mystical beam of transmission besides your ordinary mental activity, it's like this one little pirate, one little rogue wave that you're transmitting, and it always goes out. But you don't realize that you are the transmitter. It feels like it's going through you. The mystical area of the brain is here. Shangri-La, Atlantis, paradise is here. It's always been right there. And it is a particular space. But it gets smaller and smaller. It is man settling the wilderness. It is. The fearless is the mystic who go out and explore the frontier. But then it's the fat who settle it. It's the farmers. It's the do-nothing. It's the middle class. It's the boobs. The bourgeoisie come in and settle it. Once the gunslingers, once the adventurers, once the Magellans and the Balboas, they come in and swackle their bush and buckle their swash. They go out and do all the exciting things, and they send word back, well, now I've killed off all the wild natives, and I built a few huts, and we got a place to dock ships. And so what do they send over next? They send over Queen Isabella, they send over the fat burghers, the guys that'll come in and wear shoes and clothes and have wives and little families, and they settle down and set up shop and go into business. And then the adventurers move on. In the frontier, like in the American West, as they say, it finally gets the time when they begin to settle, then these gunslingers, these solo adventurers, it's kind of, get out of here, you're outdated. They're not actually outdated, they're overdated, they're indated. Because the brain itself, this area that is mystical, I keep refraining from drawing it somewhere, but the area that's mystical, it is like the Wild West. It is like the unexplored frontier and the middle class. The fat burghers keep encroaching. It gets settled a little bit, and it becomes the norm. Which is why anything a mystic already knows, or anything anybody else knows, or anything he's already thought, it's not a joke. Well, hey, I've already lived there. What else is new? God, but yesterday I understood something that I never understood. I understood something that, the Pope doesn't understand, or that, Nietzsche didn't understand, or Goethe. Me staying here talking, you going, forget all that. That might as well be a movie within a movie, a game within a game, a dream within a dream, except now you're partially awake. Because you realize, well, it doesn't matter whether this is happening or not. It's only ordinary people go, well, what do you mean that doesn't matter? That matters severely, extremely. That's the difference between sanity and, well, insanity. That's the way they like to put it. What they're saying is, well, that's the difference in us having a law-abiding, peaceful little western town here and finally getting rid of all this riffraff and these dangerous people. Get us a sheriff and we'll run insanity out of town. And we don't have time for that. We now need decent farmers and merchants and sane people. Good thoughts, dependable thoughts. Thoughts you can rely on. You mean like thoughts you had yesterday? Yes, thoughts we can all agree on. We know what sanity is here in Deadwood or Dry Gulch. We know what it is. It's these outlaws, these guys that, they were necessary for a while, but those people you can't depend on. They're too erratic. You don't know what they're going to do from one day to the next.